All right, stick tight, guys, because today is going to be a very jam-packed day. I've got a ton of content to cover. A lot of things have been happening, and I want to cram that all in right now. Before I start, let me just remind you guys that July 1st is coming up, and that will be the final day to have a chance to be entered in the first ever Arana Nation raffle. July 1st at 4 p.m. sharp is when that will end. So if you haven't donated now, continue to donate. The good news is that we've got a ton of money. People donating. Um, that's the good news. But the even better news for you is that while there have been a lot of people donating, it hasn't been like an uncontrollable amount. So you still have a fairly good chance of winning an iPhone 5C. I've told people those who've already donated are already going to have their name in the raffle. But if you donate from now until July 1st at 4 p.m. sharp, you will have your name entered in that raffle and you will have a chance to win an iPhone 5C if your name gets taken out of the bucket. So do it now. Anything that is $1 and above, do it. That's the announcement. So let's get on with the story of this topic of this video here. Ottawa's carbon pricing law valid, Ontario's top court rules. We all knew that was going to happen. So a bunch of provinces are suing the federal government because of this whole thing with the carbon tax. They say they're not going to implement a carbon tax. The federal government says, okay, we'll do one for you. And then these provinces, okay, I'm going to sue you then. You think you're going to do this? I'm going to sue you. I'll sue you. Ruling follows 4 days of arguments after Court of Appeal made rare moves to televise proceedings. I personally don't think that they should sue. I'm going to tell you what I think the provinces should do to fight this carbon tax going forward, especially since the courts in Canada are never, ever going to judge on the side of freedom. They're never going to judge on the side of more money in the pockets of people. They're never going to do that. It's never going to happen. First of all, Canada has no constitution to run on, so there's nothing that they can base their judgment on. They just go by what is in their heart. So let's read a few of these articles, and then we'll go on to where I think these provinces should go from here. The federal government's carbon pricing scheme is constitutionally sound and has the critical purpose of fighting climate change, Ontario's top court ruled in a split decision released on Friday. And of course, you guys who have listened to me for a while know that a carbon tax will do nothing but make the environment worse. You know, Arana Nation is environmentalist. I'm a green. I'm pretty green, but where I part ways with the establishment Greens is that unless there is jobs being lost, freedom being taken, money being taken, or freedoms being lost, they don't want to hear about a plan for the environment. So that's where we part ways. They're saying the carbon tax will work. I know, and you guys know, it's not an opinion. We know a carbon tax will do nothing but give those jobs an excuse to go to China and America and Mexico and all those other places where they will emit even more carbon into the atmosphere because those countries don't have environmental regulations that fit our standards. That's why I'm endorsing Andrew Scheer's climate plan. It is advocating for newer green technology and not carbon tax. I fully endorse that plan, that particular climate plan, 100%. The only thing I disagree with is this whole notion that we should meet Paris agreements. What Paris agreements? You know, I don't care about what any international people agree on. I just want to know what we can do to benefit our own country that doesn't hurt anybody but actually enriches us. You guys know what I've advocated for. replacing concrete with hempcrete. It's more environmentally friendly. It's actually profitable. Encourage people to grow marijuana and make profits off of it. Encourage people to recycle and throw their garbage away and make profit off of garbage and off of recyclables. Using the recyclables and the garbage to make things. First of all, you could use garbage to as an energy source for cars. You can do that, and a biodegradable or whatever it's called. Secondly, you can use recyclables, plastics, to make roads and infrastructure with. So make profit off of these things. Don't take money away. Use this crisis, if you want to call it a crisis, use this environmental cleanup to profit the average man and woman. And I'm not going to listen to any of you Bay Street Tories out there saying there's no such thing. I don't even want to hear you guys. I'm not interested in those old arguments anymore. One side saying we have to do carbon tax, the other extreme saying we don't have to do anything. We can do this in a way. My base is the silent majority who is sensible, who is not radically in outer space somewhere, who just wants to make a living and all that stuff. Average, ordinary people can profit off of cleaning up our environment, profit off of plastic, profit off of growing marijuana, profit off of throwing away your garbage and all that stuff. You can profit off of that stuff. The Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, enacted in April, is within Parliament's jurisdiction to legislate in relation to matters of national concern. Chief Justice George Strathy wrote on behalf of the court, quote, Parliament has determined that atmospheric accumulation of greenhouse gases causes climate changes that pose an existential threat to human civilization and the global ecosystem, Strathy said. The need, quote, for a collective approach to a matter of national concern and the risk of non-participation by one or more provinces permits Canada to adopt a minimum national standards to reduce greenhouse emissions, unquote. Ontario's progressive conservative government under Premier Doug Ford, who calls the carbon tax an illegal tax, argues that the act is a violation of the Constitution. We have no Constitution. We don't have one. We only have a charter. That's not a Constitution, because it allows the federal government to intrude on provincial jurisdiction. During 4 days of submissions in April, Ontario insisted the act would undermine cooperative federalism. So here's where I think that Ontario and Alberta and all these other provinces need to do going forward. This is what they need to do. First of all, you're not going to stop the government doing what it wants to do when it comes to taxes. You can't, that you just can't do it. It's not going to happen. And the judges and the courts are not going to cooperate with you. You're just wasting more money and to go to the courts. What they need to do is this. If I was advising Mr. Ford instead of the idiots that advise him right now, I would say this, and he watches Arana Nation. He knows who I am. When he sees me in public, he's, hey, it's the Commander-in-Chief of Arana Nation. How you doing? Gives me a big hug and everything. Premier, what you need to do is, first of all, you need to impose a tax, a property tax, on all federally owned land, a provincial property tax on all federally owned land. And it is within your rights to do that. It is. And if they try and sue or anything, you can just go to the courts and say, hey, it's there. They can do this to the carbon tax. We're going to put a tax on you guys. And so you put a tax on federally owned land. Put a tax on property like the Parliament, Sussex Drive, Canada Government House, all the Canadian post offices. Put a proper, huge one, like 90% property tax on federally owned land. Federally owned land. So the federal government has to pay a huge property tax. Number two, impose a payroll tax for all Canadian politicians. Politicians, MPs, MPPs, the Prime Minister, federal politicians within Ontario. They have to pay a large portion of their pay to the provincial government. And use that money that you get. It probably won't be a lot, but it's something. Use that money to compensate all the people who have to waste money on this carbon tax, and all the companies as well. All the companies as well. You know why I say all the not because I believe in any of these companies or anything. I'm not because of that. Not because of that, but because we need to have these companies to stay in Canada as much as possible and regulate them, force them to plant trees, force them to clean up their act, all this stuff. A tax isn't going to do that. You need to replace things, you need to do all that sort of stuff. And say to them, look, we're going to compensate you with this money that we're taking from the Canadian federal government. Take as much money from the Canadian federal government as possible and use that money to compensate all the people and all the businesses that have to pay this carbon tax. And what you do is that you make the carbon tax almost obsolete. It doesn't work. And then the federal government will have no choice but to sit down and negotiate. It won't be enough. They may not do it, but it's worth a try. That's what I would do. Stop wasting money going to court. You're not going to get anywhere with any court. I knew that was going to happen from day one. Jason Kenney, Doug Ford, Premier of Prince Edward Islands, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, all these people going up into, you're just wasting more money on lawyers and all this other stuff. You're not getting anywhere. They're not going to do anything. So what you need to do is take all of these all of these provinces, take as much money that you can from the federal government. Take as much as you can. If you have to impose a 95% property tax on all federally owned land that is owned by the Canadian government, do it. Do it 100%. If you have to tax all the Canadian politicians that you can, all of them, tax them as much as you can, and to get that money and compensate all of those jobs and people who are paying this non-starter tax. Because if you don't do that, these jobs will go other places. You'll have many of your people unemployed, and they'll just emit more carbon. Now, I'm not trying to protect those rich people. I don't care about them. Like, the hell with them. I'm not kidding. I'm concerned about the workers who are going to lose their jobs, and I'm concerned about the environment when they move to China. That is why I'm saying we need to do that. The carbon tax is worse for the environment, and it hurts the little guy. So that's what they need to do going forward. And we'll see what happens. I don't think they'll take the advice because, these guys are they're so controlled by fools, idiots. Doug Ford is surrounded by a lot of idiots. I mean, he's getting rid of some of them, but it seems to be like a roach infestation. You kill one, more come in. You need to get a high-powered pesticide, Arana Nation, that can get rid of these roaches and go in the right direction. So take as much that you can. Take as much that you are able to do. Canadian-owned companies, tax them. CBC, tax CBC. It's within Ontario. Tax it hard too. Take all that money, gobble it up all together, and compensate all of the people who are being burdened with this carbon tax. That's what you need to do. So it would make the carbon tax almost obsolete. We'll see what happens going forward, but I don't think we should waste any more money on going to any court, Supreme Court or Superior Court. It doesn't make a difference. This is the Arana Nation.